Vero and Javi, if you could just do me a favor and introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Go ahead, Vero.
Okay, I'm Veronica Fernández. Right now I'm in Kazakhstan, but I live in Spain, but I was born in Venezuela. And I've been with BH for, I think more than 5 years, but I know them since so long that I don't remember. I'm so proud about it. I'm really glad to be here and be able to share with you a couple of ideas and also learn from you, from your comments and your ideas. Javi. Can you, Javi?
Super. My name is Javier Munoz. I am passionate about the methodologies and the technologies to create and sustain the conditions for happiness in organizations. So I helped found the Spanish division of the company, and we've been basically very busy working from here at a global level, trying to spread happiness in organizations.
Great, and I am Bree, so I am the host for today, for our webinars. And we'll just be going through this webinar talking about, how to create a culture of happiness. And we're going to go over the DH roadmap, which is a methodology we use to create change in the workplace, which is really hard sometimes. So let's go ahead and get started.
Super.
You're up, Avi.
So, yeah. So when addressing the question of how to create a culture of happiness, which is, of course, the subject for today's webinar, we should probably start with the why before the how, right? So if you and your team are aligned on the why for a happy culture, the how will be much easier. Now let's consider the first part of this quote that we have in the screen. Change happens everywhere and to everything naturally. Change, of course, is a fact of life. What would happen then if change was by design and not by default? Wouldn't that be empowering? Wouldn't that be a sign of leadership? What would happen if it were not a reaction to a situation, but a proactive way to improve your situation? You could actually be in the driving seat of this change and proactively define a culture that would support and accelerate, for example, your business strategy. So let's now consider the second part of this quote. Imagine what organizations could be when they are not designed as machines, but treated as living and growing ecosystems. Again, why would we need to see them as an organism? Is it because it is a hippie peace and love thing to do? Is it because it is something you need to make millennials feel good and come to work for you? Well, maybe it is all of those things, but there is a lot more to it. Rigid mechanical organizational structures used to work very well because the way in which an organization created value used to be more predictable. Since it was predictable, it would make sense to extract the maximum efficiency by making it mechanical. However, a rigid mechanical organizational structure cannot adapt. It cannot do it in a seamless way with agility. It cannot evolve at a pace that is now required. But now we are starting to understand the role of culture. We understand how it can shape the organization's ability to create value, to be resilient and adaptive. And the nature of culture is, of course, as the term itself implies, organic. So, as always, the idea of the organization as a living organism is actually driven by the fact that now it is simply a better way to generate value. The machine-like command and control hierarchical model of running a company was, in fact, a tremendously successful model to generate value in the 20th century. And so we should be grateful for it, of course. But now we are living a historical moment. It is a paradigm shift of sorts. For the first time in history, the best organizational model to create value is actually fully aligned and supported by human happiness. In other words, what makes a company succeed is also what supports your happiness. And that's a first in the history of humanity. And probably we don't realize it, but it is. It is only by applying the science of happiness, which is very recent, and by building strong, value-driven cultures that we will create the conditions to thrive in the future. So very well, now that we have covered a little bit of the why, let's dive into the how. Bri, go ahead and take over now to introduce the Delivering Happiness Roadmap, and we'll then go on and explain each of the phases.
Yeah, so this is the DH roadmap. You can see there are 5 different phases, but you know, if you think of your business like an ecosystem, any environment, maybe it's a forest, maybe it's the jungle, you know, you have different parts of that ecosystem thriving in different moments. You know, a tree might be dying somewhere where, you know, an animal's just given birth. There are different parts that are in different phases at one time. So think of your business just like that. There's going to be different parts in different phases at one time because it is a living and thriving ecosystem. And that's really how we approach businesses in our work. So let's go over the first stage here. So that's inspire.
Silence. Now I can go. The first stage of this roadmap is to achieve one of the key challenges that we normally have in cultural transformation, which is leader commitment. The main goal is to get leaders role modeling the culture you want to achieve, and not all models, because if you want to achieve an ideal culture and ideal values, and you are addressing the whole organization on how to live those values, normally they will look up to their leaders to see how are they achieving that success. And if there is a connection between the organizational message of the new culture, values, and the way we want to live, and they see that leaders are not living, they're not walking the talk, the risk of lose all credibility is huge. So one of the main goals for this part is make sure your leaders are committed with their mind, with their hearts, with resources, so they understand and they are all aligned with the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we making a cultural transformation? And so they also sponsor the whole process just by role modeling and sponsor it with resources, time. Normally those projects are time consuming. You need to dedicate time to create a new culture. Cultural transformation, you normally need insistent, persistent, and consistent. You need to be giving messages several times, in several different channels, in several different ways, through a long period of time, in a persistent way, in a consistent way that all leaders are given the same message. So this first stage is key to set the ground to have a proper and really sustainable way of doing. Also, this stage is pretty good to have this fierce culture vision. You don't have a final culture vision until the defined stage, but it's really good to have a fierce idea of how to do it, and have a clear idea or a draft or culture team that's going to help you through the whole process. That's really important also in this stage.
Hey, Vero, real quick, I'm going to stop your video so that your audio comes through a little bit better. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Go ahead and continue on. Thanks.
In fact, it's better for me. I don't like seeing myself. So also, perhaps if you want to do a cultural transformation and you want your leaders to be on board and other leaders to be on board, it's really important for this stage to gain some buy-in. The importance of change, the race of urgency. Why have to do this and why now? It's really a key issue also here. We have so many HR leaders or CEOs that comes to us and normally ask, can you help me? Can you help me inspire others? Because I cannot do it. So sometimes in this, for Inspire, it's necessary to build a business case for your own organization, why you need a cultural transformation, how you want to do it. So you have somehow a way to sell the idea and to gather the buy-in from everyone on this project. I want to share an example with you about Inspire. It's the same project I'm working in right now in Kazakhstan. Our client is BI Group, one of the biggest constructor in Central Asia right now. And the CEO read DH book, Delivering Happiness, and he was inspired. And I think we all agree that in order to inspire, you have to let yourself be inspired by others. It's an act of being humble, and so it's a way to start the sparkle, to yourself be inspired. He read the book, he got inspired. Top 30 CEOs and board members.
Hey, Vero, could you repeat that again about someone was reading the book and got inspired?
Yeah, the CEO read the book, got inspired, and he shared the book with the rest of his team, top 15 boarders. And all of them, they got like, we need to do this, we need this in our company. They were living a major strategic transformation, and they just realized strategic transformations cannot be done without culture, because culture goes, I don't want to say beyond strategy, because I know, say, yeah, you remember Peter Druck quote, like, they go, culture eats strategy for breakfast. We'd rather think that they go and have breakfast together. So they all got inspired. We had a masterclass with them in Dubai with top 150 people. And now we are running a program. Everyone is engaged in the program. So key learning here for this stage, make sure all your leaders are at the same page. All your leaders are aligned and committed to the project. If they're not, I think it's better to stop and reframe yourself on how to get their buy-in. You see some metrics here. The soft stuff is the hard. Sometimes to get more finance guys, you need to show them the role of this project in order for. Otherwise, don't think about startup because the risk of losing credibility is too high. That's why it's fun. So I think that's pretty much the Inspire.
Hey, Vero. Sorry, could you hear me for a second?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so your sound is a little bit patchy. We can come back to this stage at the end just to recap this, talk a little bit about metrics, but let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay,
that works.
Perfect.
Right, so, yeah, we're going to go into the assess stage here.
Okay, can you hear me? I just want to make sure I'm measuring that you can.
We can hear you. It just keeps cutting in and out. So maybe speak Long and slow. And
Long
we'll try that.
and slow. Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
A typical question is, how do we measure culture? How can we measure happiness? Some things that are so intangible, they are so hard to measure. But this is our main goal for this stage, in assess, in order to analyze the current situation, cultural situation of the company. We have to measure it. We have to establish some KPIs, some ways to measure how culture, what is working in the current culture situation, what is not working for them, for the company. And it's not always the same for all companies. And that's why it's so important to make a specific assess methodology for different companies that you may be in that moment. For example, in our case, we always try to combine quantitative and qualitative tools, so we have a proper understanding of culture, of the situation. And in a case, we have a brand new tool. It's called Delivering. And it's really interesting. I'm not trying to yeah, that's the photo of the Delivering Happiness. One of the, tell me.
Vera, you cut out a little bit, but this is a screenshot from our DHI. So it's called the Delivering Happiness Index. That is what she's going to go over right now, just to show like how other ways that you can assess your culture, but one methods that we use.
Exactly. Most surveys that we have nowadays, they normally address engagement and they normally address satisfaction. If you see our metrics, we can see overall happiness. So we are trying to combine some of the KPIs, the most related variables, with happiness. In our model, in the Delivering Happiness model, based on psychology and science of psychology, we have identified key elements that leverage happiness in a culture. So we measure these elements, and we get these KPIs. This first quantitative information that's really important for us, for the picture of the organization at that moment. But what normally happens is that quantitative data is not enough. When we're talking about culture, we're talking about intangible, as I said before. We're talking about emotions, people, values. It's mandatory. I know this is a strong word, but it's mandatory to compensate all the info and to bring more insight with qualitative information, with focus groups, interviews. So we get into the root of the problem. Most of our surveys, they show you the situation, but you don't know what's going on behind. What's the why, what's going on? What's the profound reason that is behind all this data? And normally this is a really good input for this stage of assess, to combine these tools in order to do it. And we had so many projects that our clients say like, no, we have already a survey, and we can go along with the survey. That's enough photo. And we say like, this is like when you take a picture like from far away. If you want to get into the details, you need to go closer. And the way to get closer is by having a person-to-person relationship during the assess stage. So qualitative in this case is a really good way to do this part of the stage. How are we doing? Are you hearing me? I'm a little bit like,
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I'm just having to open up the Q&A because I keep seeing some things pop up. But you can go ahead and keep going. And
okay. Good. So once we have a really good idea of, hey, what's going on, how's everything, that's when we are prepared to go into the next stage, the define. But I want to remember what Javi was saying, and also you mentioned, Bri, about an organization is as an organism, a living ecosystem. So these stages are not like have to go one after another. It's a specific tool for this specific stage. No, it's a dynamic and it's a flow. It's a framework. But we can also have some, for example, some part of assess. A certain point is also a good bridge to define. No, it's already giving you the idea of what's going to be necessary for the next stage, what's going to be needed for the defined stage in order to have a better culture idea, culture vision. No, is the synergy between these two stages is really high, really strong. So in the defined stage, we have like two main goals. One definition is about culture per se. You define culture elements. And we know about the DH model. Cultural elements are called values and behaviors. Cultural elements related with sense of progress, sense of control, and connectedness, and higher purpose. The first two define values and higher purpose. Those are the basic and most strong elements for a sustainable culture. So the definition of culture model for a different company is a main goal in this stage. Also identify and define the rollout program for the next stage is really important. Key initiatives that may help you to keep those values on this element alive, and how to introduce them to all company. Which elements are you're gonna use to foster those elements within the company. In the way we do the definition, most companies, they use limit culture with the values, but we have much a broader view of the culture, because we use the culture canvas, for example. Really good tool. Is even a methodology. It's based on business canvas model, but we use a culture canvas model. So we can try, we join the cultural elements with business elements, because culture has to be defined in order to help and to achieve success in business. This is really important in this element. I mean, the definition of culture has to be strategic. Most companies sometimes even go with copy paste. Oh, I like this whichever company culture. Let's try to copy. We know Zappos is a really inspiring company. Is our our starting point. And so many companies and clients, they come to us. Okay, how they did it? How they do it? Let's copy Zappos. And the idea is not to copy anything. I mean, culture has to be unique. So at this stage, one of the key learnings and to avoid the biggest pitfall is don't try to copy anything. Make your own culture. And the other key element for this stage, and it's also related with key elements for cultural transformation or any change at all, is change has to be done co-created. So everyone, all employees, they feel responsible, they feel part of the change, they own the culture, the ownership, they earn the ownership of the culture. So at this stage, try to have unique definition and try to make it co-creative as many people as possible. Is really important. Also, this initiative for behavioral change, co-create them with all your employees. It's really important for all of them to be part of the culture, no? To gain this ownership. And in the few minutes I have left, I want to share an example. Some of the also recent clients that we have. So you can have an idea of how we do values definition. In this case, it's just referring to values. I know it's a lot of information, but I just want to take a look at the first three from left to right, from November to March. There was all about value sessions with leaderships, with different sessions, with refreshment kickoff. So we create initial draft. No, that's another idea with values. No, values are not made like, okay, let's get together, imagine a couple of values, and that's it. You know, you need different ways to collect values, combine different inputs to make first initial draft. Activity that's in the middle looks like a poster in April. This is really good trending initiative. That one, Bri.
So
that's
yeah,
really
this
trending.
This posters activity is what we're talking
about. That's a poster activity. And we just having such a good results with this activity. We're almost doing it with all our clients. I'm gonna do it with a VI group here, and I know Javi is gonna do it in one of his projects also. And with this activity, we create a first draft of values, and then we share it. It's a way of democratize, yeah? It's a proper way in English? To make it democratic, in a democratic way. So you collect the voting for all the employees. So you have a voting process with posters, voting cards, but it's not like you just launch a voting. They have discussions in different moments with a facilitator. We talk about the different values, and then we vote, and we collect the voting from all the employees, which is really strong. We are already having a conversation about values. We are talking about the importance of values. So you are defining, and at the same time, people is already getting engaged about culture. People is already getting engaged about the importance of the culture. Make sure you always communicate the why also in this stage, at every stage. But once you have this final draft, as we say, final core values with executive members, it's always necessary to validate values with top leaders in order for these values to be strategic, so they support business. And then all the rest from June to the end is just launching the values, the rollout, and so how we are already stepping into the next stage. No, you know, once you have the definition, the idea is how you're gonna make it happen, how you're gonna apply all the culture that you just define, all the initiative that you have, how you're gonna make it happen in the day-to-day basis. This is pretty much that's the link between these two stages, no? And just final definition, and they just start living the culture.
Right, awesome. And yeah, as soon as in the rollout process, that's kind of when you begin seeing how to live this culture that you've created. So let's go on to the next stage there. Thanks, Vero.
Cool.
So this piece I'm going to deliver. So imagine you have already inspired people to understand what to do in this journey of transformation in terms of culture. You have made some assessment of what's the situation and made some decisions. You started to define the program, the values. You have now to do something. Now what? What are we going to do? And probably this stage of leaving what you have defined is what really determines whether or not you did a good job in the last 3 phases, right? So it is when all these things come together in a dynamic way, in an organic way. And that's when all this that you define has to actually become true. And so this is probably one of the most challenging phases where it has to be true, where people start to adopt these ideas, where people start to become aware of these values, where the values start to be used for leadership, for decision making, to make every move that the company does. So it is really the foundation of this transformation. And so in doing that, we are pretty much obsessed with a word. The word is momentum. How to keep the momentum of this transformation going. You know, most of our attention is placed on whether or not we are getting that critical mass of people that are adopting these ideas, moving forward, transforming, feeling the benefits of it, and really embedding them in their day-to-day. And so, of course, this is an organic process. It goes up and down. Some of the initiatives work, some other initiatives don't, just like in nature, where not every organism makes it. And there are adaptations and evolution, right? So this is the same thing. And you have to have the structures, though, so that you are able to sustain those ups and downs. And people have to understand that that's a fact of life. So the key things that we look for are, what are the types of activities, dynamics, or areas that will create the biggest evident benefit to everyone with the least possible energy, so that people can place their focus on one thing and create evidence of a benefit. And look, I'm saying evidence of a benefit. We have to perceive that benefit. We have to feel and consolidate that growth. And understand that from that, we can move on, so that it creates the energy for continuity, instead of people getting bored or overwhelmed with so many things. So what is the typical thing that a client asks you? They ask you to go over their whole list of initiatives, and they just want to launch everything at once. And it's okay, because it's probably founded on the best of intentions. They just want to solve their problems. They want to put everything to work. They want for people to be happy, to feel that everything is changing. But at the same time, you're overwhelming people with so many things that nothing gets done, and people get confused and you lose traction. And so that's why it's so important to start slow. Something that is co-created, that has like a start and a beginning and an end, in the sense that after you launch that initiative, you can just follow it up with another one seamlessly, that keeps you on the track of growth. So at the same time, as you do that, as you manage this momentum, you have to stay realistic and keep the leadership aware that there will be speed bumps, and have them have that expectation that we have to stay on board and pay attention to those situations. So our role, of course, as facilitators, is to prevent, or at least create the alliances, the internal alliances, so that when things happen, they have the resources to overcome those problems, those speed bumps, and address them in a way that is clear and that they can result in specific actions. So our work, since there is a pattern to this, is to recognize what are the possible situations that they may encounter in the future and prepare them for that. So this is one of the most exciting phases for me. And it is really the product of all the hard work. And I want to complete the explanation of this phase also pointing out one thing that goes beyond methodology and technology. This has to do with the fact that it's a labor of love in the end. It's a labor of love where we are all on board, and we have to understand that the resistance that you may have is just comes from human nature, and that we need to be able to support each other. And so our role as facilitators is basically to raise that awareness, to provide that sense of humanity to the process, and to highlight that it is in creating great connectedness and meaning for this process that we'll be able to be patient with each other and tune into the intention of it, and keep reminding ourselves that this is a common goal, and that we are appreciating everyone's effort in moving forward. So it's a labor of love beyond technology and methodology and roadmaps and programs. So that's one key thing I always want to share, because you have to connect from that place to make it work. So if we go back to the slide, I also think that it's extremely important to provide the clients with specific, simple tools. So in the beginning, we were into having the client co-create everything. But then we realized that starting with a few prescribed tools that we know are effective, that are universally powerful, would be a great way to create the initial traction. Then, of course, evolution takes over, and you can start feeling more creative and creating things that are refreshing. Bri, go back to the slide that you had with the tools. So,
all right, let me try to do that 1 second. It's not letting me. Let me try to go back.
So essentially, there are two things that I wanted to show you regarding tools. Beyond prescription of the tools, as we just talked about, it is also really convenient to have some of the tools be digital, because in many cases we have people in different locations, and it is such a challenge to create a cohesive culture when you have people in different countries or different offices. And so the availability of tools that are digital is so convenient to precisely create this overall sense of awareness for the meaning of the values and the meaning of the culture that you're defining. And also for a second purpose, because they provide very valuable analytics. And the analytics are especially important so that you can have a sense of progress, and you can communicate that sense of progress to the leadership and to everyone in the organization. Over time, people may lose track of what's going on with the great big culture initiative, but if you keep giving them bits and pieces, analytic pieces, communicating the qualitative, as Veronica was saying, along with the quantitative information, it provides a sense of progress, and it provides with energy. So this is a very important element to keep the momentum. Then, of course, communication. One of the most important aspects of this phase has to do with how you communicate. Create awareness for what's going on, to create awareness for all the elements of the culture you define, such as values, such as this values campaign that you saw in the previous phase, that can also continue throughout the live phase in order to dig into what are the behaviors that would help us believe the value of whatever, whichever value better this month. So you can do monthly campaigns and raise the awareness that way. Or you can have more analog tools such as this gratitude wall, right? This has a combination of being a tool and at the same time of communicating that we are building a culture of gratitude. And of course, it generates also all other elements of and factors of happiness, such as the sensation that you're making progress in life when you see that your work is being recognized in the gratitude wall. So there are so many elements of these tools that help the continuity of the program. Bree, if you want to go to the next phase.
Yep. So for this last phase, we only have a couple minutes here, Javi. So if you can just go over it real quick, and then we could take some questions. So the Q&A feature, by the way, everyone, I was able to get it show up on my other screen. So if you want to go ahead and think about some questions, send them in through there. We can answer them, take a little bit of time doing that.
Sure, I'll go fast. And the evolution piece is basically the sum of all the parts. Basically, during the evolution piece, there are two things that happen, but one concretely is that the leaders keep on inspiring people. You keep on measuring the progress of all the programs. So you're making the assessment. You're defining initiatives to keep it fresh and alive. That's very important. By sending or launching one initiative, you're not going to make this work. You have to keep it going. So by launching different types of initiatives in a way that is systemic, you're going to be able to evolve. And so you just keep measuring, testing, succeeding, and failing. And that's the process of evolution. Now, if you go to the next slide, just quickly, you will see that there is a second part to evolution, which has to do with going deep into the structures of the processes. So this is where the newly defined culture really takes hold in the operation. And of course, this takes time. Normally, this happens in the second year, even the third year of a long-term happiness and culture program. That's when you go deep into all the internal communication systems, the organizational structure, the hiring process, the onboarding process, and you embed the values, the systems that you have optimized in terms of those values. And that's when you really need the whole system and create the sustainability and also the capacity for this company to evolve on its own. So that's when we have success. And, you know, to some degree, it's a weird way for a consultant to be successful when you're not needed anymore, right? But in delivering happiness, we like to believe that what we are here to do is to empower companies to identify and discover their genetic DNA so that they can make that relevant to raise the awareness for everyone to understand that this is explicitly what they are, and to raise the awareness that this is what we have to protect and grow with. So after that, you have all the resources to keep on going, evolving, and making it better. And so our objective is to create that sense of autonomy for the companies that go through this journey.
Yeah, great. And so we're going to take some time here to answer some questions. So if you have some questions, feel free to chat them in the chat box or use the Q&A feature. We'll be able to see those either way and answer them. But as I wrap up here, I'll just let you know that if you have any additional questions, maybe you're thinking later, you know, hey, I just thought of this question, go ahead and email April at deliveringhappiness.com. She is on our team and she'll be able to answer those and get back to you via email. And just by the way, you are going to get an email from us with the recording of this webinar, so feel free to forward it to your team. So we just got a question in the chat box from Alana. She's asking, what's the best way to define culture for a workforce working remotely? So I love that question. So Vero or Javi, feel free to take it. We just have about 9 minutes till the end.
I can take it if you want, and Vero, please jump in anytime you want.
Okay.
You know, my perspective on that is that, of course, you can do it in a way where a piece of this process of definition happens in person by having everyone traveling to one place. That, of course, is very costly. There are other ways to do it, such as by using technology. So there are, for example, technologies where you can have everyone download an app and select their personal values. And then by being together in a group, you can calculate what are the values that are shared by all that population. And this is a process that is fast. You can do it quickly. And on top of it, you can have people also write how they live those values that they have selected. So you can go even beyond the definition of the shared values into the behaviors and collect all the behaviors that people have entered for each of the values that they have selected, and then calculate or analyze what are the mutually exclusive behaviors for each of the values. And so from there, you can certainly create like a good foundation that has been co-created by everyone in the organization, even though they are in remote places, by using these types of technologies. So that's a good way to do it.
Just to add, for example, the initiative we did with Sally Mae is really good example also to use in remotely workforce. We did it also, we're going to do it also in Estafeta in Mexico. Mexico is a huge city, a huge country. And it was really good. And if you can combine voting and all of this with technology, as Javi said, you can get the ideas and also cascade different meetings, remote meetings to support technology. That's a really good idea. Have to get it.
Great. Alana, I hope that answered your question here. And Javi just typed in the name of the company. It's Mural. We have a couple questions from Willow. Wondering which one to answer first.
Actually, Bri, I just wanted to point out that this company is a client of ours, and they have these really amazing digital co-working spaces that where you can share all kinds of ideas in a sort of digital canvas, and it's really nicely featured with all kinds of functionality to communicate and collaborate really effectively.
I'm going to go with first of the question from Willow. For example,
let's go ahead and tell everyone the question. So Willow asks, we mentioned the importance of structure to sustain progressive momentum during the goals phase. I believe that's probably during the evolve or the live phase there. And she's asking for an example of what a structure might mean to sustain your culture.
Yeah, those are the teams that are normally involved in the project. For Evolve, we have the basics teams are the core team, which is the team that is basically coordinating and leading the project. It doesn't mean that they are the leaders of the project. They are like more leading, directing the project. And what we have is really strong and well known is ambassadors or champions. Those things, that team is normally in charge of all the initiative, and to keep that momentum, have it shared with different initiatives in short, medium, and long term. Another structural team that is really necessary from the beginning, from the same beginning, is culture. Sorry, the sponsors team, which is top managers that make the most of strategic decisions about culture, how we should change it, which are the different initiatives, they validate all the initiatives and so on. So these are, for example, 3 classic structural teams we use to keep momentum through the whole project.
Great. And then let's go ahead and move to her next question, which is a great one. So I'll summarize it. How do values inform behaviors and show up in an employee's accountability as they evolve in a role? So how can values tie to behaviors, but also, you know, create accountability for an employee?
Okay, how do you want to take that?
Yeah, I would think that the first and most important step in achieving that is for the leaders to really get it and to really use the language of the values and to really use it in their decision-making process to solve critical situations. The tough situations typically are the ones where maybe you stand to gain something economically, but it's not the right thing to do. And then, so the value is used to make the right decision. And when those things happen consistently, then you're becoming accountable for the values that you defined. And then people are believing in how important this is. They realize that it wasn't just a gimmick or some sort of marketing strategy to get employees to feel that this was a great place to work. So the basic principle is for the leadership to really get it and start applying it for their own important decision-making processes. Like, you know, I'll tell you an example is there are situations where, for example, you could have a very good salesperson that is extremely good, is performing amazingly, but it's not a culture fit. It's not really living the values of the company. What do you do? So this is a typical question that we ask CEOs of a company, right? We want to really understand to what degree they are prepared to make the question that could actually hurt the bottom line in the short term, and how much of a vision they have that when you do that, you're actually investing in the future greatness of the team as they move from a model of competition to a model that is values driven. So that's my take. Of course, we don't have much time to go into all the other scenarios, but this is one of the key ones.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Javi. So we're pretty much at the last minute here. I want to make sure if you didn't have a question that was answered, you can go ahead and email that question to April at deliveringhappiness.com. You will, as a reminder, get an email from us with the recording of this webinar, and feel free to subscribe to our blogs in case you want some more helpful tips and insights from our team, including our coaches here, and to find out when our next webinar is and what that's going to be about. So thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you,
See you
everyone.
at the next webinar. Thanks, Vero. Thanks, Javi. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.